I installed the cameras because of her. Not to spy. I need you to understand that. I installed them because I woke up at 2-something in the morning, and she wasn't in bed. And when I found her, she was standing barefoot on the front lawn in 40-degree weather. And she didn't know how she got there. That was 3 weeks after the lake. I'm going to tell you everything that happened between then and now, and I need you to take it seriously because I don't have anyone left who does. Her name is Jess. We've been married 9 years. Our son, Caleb, is 5. We live in a 3-bedroom house in Granton, Indiana, the kind of neighborhood where people wave from their driveways and nobody locks their side gates. And the biggest problem on the community Facebook page is someone's sprinkler hitting the sidewalk. I need you to picture that. Picture normal. Picture boring. Picture the kind of place where nothing happens because nothing is supposed to happen. Now picture your wife standing in the middle of that street at 2 in the morning, barefoot, in a t-shirt and underwear, facing away from the house, perfectly still. And when you say her name, she turns around, and she's smiling, and she says, "Why are we outside?" Like you went out there together. Like this is something you're both doing. That was June 14th. Here's what happened before that. Memorial Day weekend. Jess and I took Caleb to Lake Covington, about 90 minutes south. Nothing special. State park, gravel boat ramp. The kind of lake where the water is brown-green and you can't see your feet once you're knee-deep. Jess grew up swimming. She was on the team in high school. She's a stronger swimmer than I am always has been. We were in the water, maybe 30 feet from shore. Caleb was on the beach with my mother-in-law. Jess was floating on her back, relaxed, eyes closed, sun on her face. I looked away for maybe 15 seconds. I was adjusting the strap on my water shoes. When I looked back, she was gone. Not swimming, not diving, gone. The water where she'd been was flat. No ripples, no splashing, nothing. I called her name. I swam to the spot. I went under. The visibility was maybe 8 inches, brown water. I couldn't see anything. I swept my arms out, kicking, reaching. My hands touched nothing. I came up, screamed her name, went under again. A park ranger was on the shore. By then someone had heard me yelling. He was pulling off his boots. My mother-in-law was standing with Caleb pressed against her hip, and Caleb was watching me with this expression I've never been able to forget. Not scared, not crying, just watching. Like he was waiting to find out what kind of world he lived in. Jess surfaced on her own, 40 feet from where she went under. 40 feet, in water that was only about 6 feet deep. She came up coughing, choking, disoriented. The ranger and I got to her. She threw up lake water on the shore, a lot of it. More than seemed possible. Her lips were gray. Her eyes were bloodshot. She was shaking so hard I could hear her teeth clicking. At the ER, they said she'd been oxygen deprived. Possible secondary drowning risk. They kept her overnight, monitored her lungs. Everything checked out. They sent her home the next day with a follow-up appointment and a pamphlet about dry drowning. She said she didn't remember going under. 1 second she was floating. The next she was choking and people were pulling her out of the water. It felt like something pulled me down, she said in the car on the way home. She said it once. She never said it again. And I didn't ask her to explain, because what would she say? There was nothing in that lake. The ranger checked. Shallow, weedy, no current. Nothing. I told myself. Panic response. The body tenses. The lungs seize. You sink. It happens. It's documented. I told myself that for about 2 weeks. Then she started leaving the house. The first time I woke up because the bed was cold on her side. Not warm and recently left cold. Cold like she'd been gone a while. I checked the bathroom. Empty. Kitchen. Empty. I looked out the front window and she was standing on the lawn. Just standing there. Arms at her sides, facing the street. I went out, touched her shoulder. She flinched like I'd woken her from deep sleep. "What happened?" she said. "You're outside." "I am?" She looked down at her bare feet, looked at the street, looked at me. And I watched her face go through this rapid series of expressions, confusion, embarrassment. A flash of something I couldn't name, and then a hard reset to normal. "I must have been sleepwalking," she said. "The accident it's probably stress. Let's go back in." And that was it. She went inside, got into bed, fell asleep in minutes. I lay next to her for 3 hours, staring at the ceiling, listening to her breathe. The next night, I stayed awake on purpose. At 2:17 a.m., she sat up in bed, eyes open but not focused, not looking at anything in the room. She pulled back the covers, stood up, and walked out of the bedroom. Smooth, fluid, no hesitation, like someone who knew exactly where they were going. I followed her. She went down the stairs, through the kitchen, unlocked the front door, unlocked it, with her fingers working the deadbolt and the chain like she was fully awake, and walked outside. She stopped in the same spot on the lawn. Same position. Arms at her sides, facing the street. Facing east, if that matters. I don't know if it matters. I stood in the doorway and watched her. She was completely still, not swaying, not shifting her weight. The kind of still that you notice because it doesn't look like sleeping or standing. It looked like waiting. After about 4 minutes, she turned around and walked back inside, past me, eyes still unfocused. She went upstairs, got into bed, and pulled the covers up. In the morning, she didn't remember any of it. "You're sure?" I said. "Babe, I was asleep. I don't sleepwalk." "You did. Twice now." She frowned, not upset, annoyed. The way you get annoyed when someone tells you something about yourself that doesn't match your own experience. "Maybe we should get one of those door alarms," she said, "for Caleb's room, when he was little. Remember? The chime thing." That's when I bought the cameras instead. 4 of them. One on the front porch, one on the back door, one in the upstairs hallway, one in the living room. I told Jess it was because of a string of package thefts on the next block. She didn't question it. She helped me pick the brand. I watched the feeds for 5 nights straight. Every night, 2:17. Same route, same spot, same direction. Sleepwalkers don't do that. They don't keep a schedule. They wander. They stumble. They bump into things. Jess navigated the house in total darkness without touching a single wall. She unlocked a deadbolt and a chain in sequence without fumbling. She walked across wet grass and cold concrete without flinching. And she always stopped in the exact same place. I measured it one morning. There was a faint wear pattern in the grass. Bare feet, pressing down the same blades, night after night. I made an appointment with Dr. Kessler, Jess's GP. Told him about the sleepwalking. He asked about the drowning. He said post-traumatic stress can cause parasomnia. The brain repeating a loop, trying to process an unresolved event. He offered a referral to a sleep specialist. Suggested melatonin. That made sense. I wanted it to make sense. That Sunday, Jess made pancakes. I need to tell you about this, because if I only describe the bad parts, you'll think she was a different person the whole time. And she wasn't. That's the thing nobody understands when I try to explain this. She was still Jess. Most of the time, she was completely, recognizably, undeniably my wife. She made pancakes that morning and Caleb wanted his in the shape of a dinosaur. Jess made something that looked more like a cloud with legs, and Caleb said, "That's the worst dinosaur I've ever seen." And Jess laughed so hard she had to put the spatula down. The real laugh. The one that makes her nose scrunch up. I sat at the table watching them, and the sun was coming through the kitchen window, and everything was warm and bright, and I thought, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I've been sleeping badly and watching too many camera feeds and turning normal grief into a ghost story. Maybe the doctor is right and the melatonin will work, and in a month we'll look back at this and I'll feel stupid for ever being scared. Jess looked over at me, still smiling, and said, "You okay?" "Yeah," I said, "just really happy right now." And I was. That's the truth. In that moment, in that kitchen, I was happy. I almost called Dr. Kessler to cancel the referral. I didn't, but I almost did. Night 11. I was watching the porch camera feed on my phone from bed when Jess walked outside. Same time, same route. She reached her spot on the lawn and stopped. Then her lips moved. I sat up, zoomed in. The camera quality wasn't great. Night vision, green-tinted, grainy, but I could see her mouth moving. Not randomly, not mumbling. She was speaking, slowly, deliberately, complete sentences, from the way her jaw and lips moved, having a conversation. With nothing. She was facing the empty street and she was talking. I went to the window. From the second floor, I could see her in the streetlight. Her mouth was moving, and every few seconds she'd stop, and her head would tilt slightly to one side, the way you tilt your head when you're listening to someone's response. Talk, pause, listen, respond, for 11 minutes. I didn't go outside. Every rational part of me said, go down there, wake her up, bring her in. But there was something about the precision of those pauses, the way her head tilted at exactly the right intervals, like the timing of a real conversation, that made me not want to be standing next to her when she was doing it. I didn't want to hear what she was saying. I didn't want to find out if someone was answering. In the morning, I asked her if she'd been dreaming. "About what?" she said. "Anything. The lake, maybe." She poured Caleb's cereal and didn't look at me. "I don't dream about the lake," she said. "I don't dream about anything anymore." She said it like it was nothing, like telling me we were out of milk. But I wrote it down. 2 nights later, I set my phone to record audio and left it on the porch railing before I went to bed. At 2:17, Jess went outside. I watched from the window. She stood in her spot. Her mouth moved. In the morning I played the recording. Most of it was nothing. Cricket noise. A car passing 2 streets over. The hum of the porch light. Then Jess's voice. Low. Not whispering, speaking at a normal volume, but in a register I'd never heard from her. Lower than her natural voice. Flatter. No emotional inflection at all. Like someone reading words they didn't understand in a language they'd only just learned to pronounce. I could only make out fragments. The audio was rough. But I heard this clearly. He keeps watching from the window. The little one sleeps through it. No, not yet. The water was warmer than I expected. Then a pause. A long one. 20 seconds of nothing. Then, I don't know how much longer I can keep answering his questions. That last line stayed with me. because it wasn't the voice of someone talking in their sleep. It was the voice of someone giving a report. I played it 4 times, then I deleted it. Then I recovered it from my deleted files and played it again. On the 5th listen, with the volume all the way up and my headphones pressed tight, I heard something I'd missed before. Underneath Jess's voice, barely audible, almost buried in the ambient noise, a second voice. Higher, smaller, responding to her between phrases with single syllables, Caleb's voice. Not on the lawn, not outside, coming from inside the house, from the direction of his bedroom window, 2 stories up, on the opposite side of the building from the porch where my phone was recording. There is no way his voice should be on that recording. I played it 3 more times to be sure. It was him. I know my son's voice. It was him, and he was responding to things she said, not randomly. In the pauses, in the gaps she left, like they were having 2 ends of the same conversation, her outside in the dark, him asleep in his bed, and it was the most natural thing in the world. I have not let Jess know I have this recording. I have not asked Caleb what he dreams about. I'm afraid of what he'd say. Things started changing during the day. If it had stayed in the nights, I could have managed. Sleep disorder, trauma response, something with a name and a treatment and a pamphlet. But it started bleeding into daylight, and that's when I stopped being able to pretend. Jess was still Jess. That's what made it so hard. She made Caleb's lunches. She laughed at things on her phone. She kissed me when I left for work. She'd lean against my shoulder on the couch, and her hair would smell like her shampoo. And for 15-20 minutes I could convince myself I was imagining all of it. Then something would happen. She stopped closing the bathroom door. Not sometimes, completely. 9 years she'd always closed it. Now she'd shower with it wide open, like the concept of privacy had become unfamiliar. And when she saw me notice, she'd close it, but there'd be this half-second delay first. This tiny flicker across her face, like she was remembering a rule she'd temporarily misplaced. One morning I came into the kitchen and she was standing at the counter with her back to me, not doing anything, just standing there, hands at her sides, facing the window. I watched her for maybe 30 seconds before I said her name. She turned around and smiled and said, "Sorry, zoned out," and went back to making coffee, except that the coffee maker wasn't on, and there were no beans in the grinder. She'd been standing in front of an empty counter, facing the window, doing nothing. And the water. She started keeping glasses of water on every surface. Nightstand, kitchen counter, bathroom sink, coffee table. I counted 9 one afternoon, all filled, all placed deliberately around the rooms she used most. "I'm just dehydrated," she said when I mentioned it. The doctor said I should drink more after what happened. Dr. Kessler hadn't said that. I checked. Then there was the Tuesday at a dinner. We were eating spaghetti, Caleb's favorite. Normal evening. Caleb was talking about a kid at daycare who ate a crayon. Jess was listening, smiling, asking follow-up questions, being a mom, being Jess. And then Caleb knocked over his cup of water. It spread across the table toward her plate. Not a big spill, the kind of thing that happens 3 times a week when you have a 5-year-old. Jess didn't move. She sat there and watched the water spread across the table and touch the edge of her plate, and she didn't reach for a napkin, didn't push back her chair, didn't react at all. She watched it with this expression of I don't know how to describe it. Focus, attention, like the spilled water was doing something interesting that she didn't want to miss. It lasted maybe 4 seconds. Then she blinked, grabbed a paper towel, wiped it up. "Butterfingers," she said to Caleb, and tickled him. And he laughed. 4 seconds. That's nothing. But in those 4 seconds, something about her face didn't belong to the woman I married. I can't explain it better than that. She was watching water move across a surface with the kind of attention you give to something you're seeing for the first time. Caleb started sleeping in our bed, not because of nightmares, because of something else. "Mommy stands in my room," he told me. Jess was at the grocery store. Caleb was sitting at the kitchen table eating crackers, and he said it without looking up, the way kids say things that terrify adults because they haven't learned yet which observations are supposed to be frightening. "When does Mommy stand in your room?" I said. "At nighttime. She comes in and stands by my bed." "Does she say anything?" "No. She just looks at me." "Does she look happy or sad?" He thought about it, actually thought about it, the way 5-year-olds do when they're taking a question seriously. "She looks like she's counting," he said. "Counting what?" He shrugged and went back to his crackers. I said as carefully as I could, "Does it scare you when Mommy does that?" He shook his head. "No, but she's colder now. When she hugs me at nighttime, her hands are really cold." He paused. "And she smells different." "Different? How?" "Like the lake." That night I added a camera to Caleb's room. At 2:17, Jess got up. She went downstairs. She went outside. She stood in her spot for 7 minutes. She came back in. But she didn't come back to bed. She went to Caleb's room. The camera showed her walking in, crossing to his bed, and standing at the edge of it, looking down at him, perfectly still, hands at her sides. She stood there for 23 minutes. I watched every second of it from the spare room, and I want to tell you something honest. I was afraid to go in there. Not afraid she'd hurt him. I didn't believe that. It was something about the way she stood over his bed with that patient, attentive stillness, like she was memorizing him. I was afraid that if I walked in, she'd look at me, and whatever expression was on her face would not be the expression of someone who'd been caught sleepwalking. At 2:47, she left his room and came back to bed. In the morning, Caleb said, "Mommy came to check on me again last night." Jess was standing right there. She looked at him and smiled. "I always check on you, baby," she said. The way she said it, smooth, easy, no hesitation, didn't sound like someone who didn't remember being in his room. It sounded like someone who remembered perfectly and wanted me to know it. I tried to be normal for a few days after that. Stopped checking the cameras. Slept in my own bed. Held Jess and she held me back. And I told myself, this is my wife. People change after they almost die. That's not supernatural. That's human. On the second day, I came home from work early. Jess didn't hear me come in. She was in the living room, sitting on the couch. Caleb was on the floor in front of her, drawing with crayons. And she was watching him, not the way a mother watches a child draw. She was watching him the way I've seen biologists watch animals through glass. Total clinical focus. Her head was tilted at that angle, the same tilt from the lawn, and her eyes were tracking his hand as it moved across the paper. Caleb looked up at her. "Mommy, you're staring." She blinked, smiled. The whole thing recalibrated in an instant. "Sorry, baby. I was just thinking about how good your drawing is." She reached down and ruffled his hair. Normal, warm, Mom. But I'd seen her face before the recalibration, and the expression on it wasn't love. It wasn't anything I had a word for. The closest I can get is interest. Deep, focused, patient interest. The way you'd look at something you were still learning to understand. I went back outside and came in again, louder. When I walked into the living room, she was on her phone, scrolling. Everything normal. The drawing on the floor was a lake, brown-green water, a stick figure floating on the surface, and underneath, drawn with a brown crayon pressed so hard it left grooves in the paper, a dark shape. An oval, too big to be a fish, too deliberate to be nothing. "What's that?" I asked him, pointing at the shape. "That's what Mommy talks to." Jess didn't look up from her phone. I put the drawing in my desk later, locked the drawer. When I checked a week later, there were 6 more drawings in there. I hadn't put them there. They were all the same lake, the same shape under the water, but in each one, the shape was closer to the surface. Night 19. I couldn't take it anymore. I decided to follow her outside. 2:17. She got up, went downstairs, went outside. I waited 30 seconds and went after her. She was in her spot on the lawn. I stood on the porch, 10 feet behind her. The street was empty. The streetlights gave everything that flat orange color that makes nighttime feel like a photograph. No wind, no sound. Just Jess and the street and the houses across the road, all dark. Her lips started moving. I stepped closer, 1 step, 2, close enough to hear. She was speaking, but the words weren't right. The cadence was English. The rhythm, the pauses, the intonation sounded like normal speech, but the words themselves were wrong. Syllables that didn't connect, sounds that didn't form anything I could recognize, like someone had taken a recording of Jess talking and scrambled the phonemes while keeping the music of her voice intact. And then she stopped and tilted her head, listening. The silence was the loudest thing I've ever experienced. Not empty, something in it. Not a sound, a pressure, like someone standing behind you in a quiet room. But it was coming from in front of her, from the street. From the dark space between the streetlights where the light didn't quite reach. I looked where she was looking. I didn't see anything. But something adjusted in the darkness. Not moved, adjusted. The way a shadow changes shape when the light source shifts. Except none of the lights were moving. Something in that dark patch rearranged itself, and for a half second, the darkness had a silhouette, and the silhouette had proportions, and the proportions were wrong. Too tall, too narrow, shoulders that started too high on the frame, a head that was shaped correctly, but held at an angle that no comfortable posture would produce. Then it was just darkness again, and Jess was still talking. I went back inside, sat on the kitchen floor with my back against the refrigerator until she came back in. She walked past me, didn't look at me, went upstairs. In the morning, everything was normal. I didn't say anything about what I saw. I'm still not sure I saw it. The next day, I walked the block trying to figure out what was in the direction Jess faced every night. Just houses. The Murillo's place, then the Deckers, then a stretch of sidewalk, then the intersection where Briarwood meets Elm. I asked Dave Decker if he'd noticed anything weird lately. Late night noise, animals acting strange. Anything. He said no. But then he said, "Your dog's been barking a lot, though. 3, 4 in the morning. Been meaning to mention it. We don't have a dog." I told him that. He frowned. "Huh. Something's barking over there. I figured it was yours." The Murillos said the same thing. Barking. Late at night. Coming from the direction of our house. I checked every camera recording from the past 3 weeks. headphones on, hour by hour. There was no barking on any of the recordings, whatever sound the neighbors were hearing. The cameras didn't pick it up. Night 24. Jess didn't go outside. I was awake, watching the feeds, and 217 came and went. She didn't move. She stayed in bed, sleeping normally, breathing normally. I felt relief, actual physical relief, like something had been pressing on my chest for weeks and finally lifted. I fell asleep around 3. At 4 a.m., I woke up because the bed was shaking. Not the house, not an earthquake, the bed. A fine, constant vibration, like a phone buzzing on silent, but coming from everywhere in the mattress at once. Jess was lying on her back, eyes closed, hands folded on her stomach the way they position people in caskets, and she was producing a sound, not quite humming, a single sustained note, low, steady, generating the vibration that ran through the mattress and the frame and into the wall. I could feel it in my teeth. I said her name. She stopped immediately, rolled onto her side, away from me, and pulled the blanket up. "Go back to sleep," she said. Clear, crisp, fully awake. But she didn't open her eyes. I lay there after that, watching the glass of water on her nightstand. The surface was vibrating, tiny concentric ripples, pulsing outward from the center, even though the bed had stopped shaking, even though the room was completely still. Like something underneath the house was still humming at a frequency I couldn't hear anymore. Caleb's drawings got more specific after that. The dark shape under the water developed features, not a face, nothing that clear. But the oval had a texture now, short, dark strokes that looked like hair, long hair, floating in water. In the most recent one, the shape had what might have been a hand, reaching upward towards the surface, toward the stick figure floating above it. I asked him about it one more time. "The thing in the water? Is that what Mommy talks to at night?" He nodded. Then he said something that made my hands go cold. "She says it's lonely. She says it just wants to come inside, where it's warm." "Inside where?" He looked at me like I'd asked the dumbest question in the world. "Inside us." Night 28. I woke up at 2:17. Not because of an alarm, not because she moved. I just woke up. My body had learned the schedule. Jess was already sitting up in bed, straight-backed, hands in her lap. But she wasn't getting up. She was looking at me. In the dark, I could see the shape of her head turned toward me, the faint light from the window catching the whites of her eyes. She was sitting perfectly still, looking directly at me, and she'd been doing it long enough that I couldn't tell when she'd started. "Jess, you follow me," she said. Not an accusation, not angry, just a statement. Flat, factual. "I'm worried about you," I said. "You watch the cameras?" "Yes." "You recorded my voice?" I hadn't told her about the recording. I hadn't told anyone. The phone with the recording was in my desk drawer at my office, 12 miles from our house. "You shouldn't have done that," she said. "Jess, I think we need to talk about. It's fine. Everything is fine. I'm getting better." "Getting better from what?" She lay back down, pulled the covers up, rolled away from me. "From the water," she said. "The water was so deep. You don't understand how deep it was. Lake Covington is 11 feet at its deepest point. I've checked." "Jess, go to sleep," she said. And I did. I fell asleep immediately, like someone had turned off a switch. Instantly and completely, which never happens to me. I'm a light sleeper. I lie awake for 20-30 minutes minimum. That night I was asleep before my next thought formed. I woke up at 7 a.m., feeling like I'd been unconscious, not sleeping, heavy, drugged. My mouth was wet, not dry the way it usually is in the morning. Wet, like I'd been drinking water in my sleep. And the glass on my nightstand, the glass I hadn't put there, was empty. I called Jess's mother that afternoon. I didn't plan to. I was sitting in my car in the office parking lot, and I called before I could talk myself out of it. "Has Jess seemed different to you?" I said. Long pause. "Different how?" "I don't know. Quieter. More contained." Another pause. Longer. "She almost died, Mark. People change after something like that. Give her time." "I know, but this feels like something else." "Like what?" I didn't answer, because what was I going to say? All of it? Any of it? Which part would make me sound less insane? "She's in therapy," her mother said. "She's processing it. Don't make her feel like something's wrong with her." I said okay. I said I was probably overthinking it. "But here's the thing," her mother said right before she hung up. And I don't think she meant to say it because her voice changed, dropped, just slightly, the way people's voices drop when they're saying something they've been holding. "Has she been doing the water thing at your house too?" "Too? What water thing?" I said. "Glasses everywhere. I thought it was just here. She came over last Sunday, and when she left, there were glasses of water on every surface. I poured them out and..." She trailed off. "And what?" "It's nothing. It's stupid. Please." They were full again the next morning. "I live alone, Mark. I didn't fill them. It's nothing. I probably just... I don't know. Maybe I forgot." She didn't sound like someone who forgot. We hung up. I sat in my car for 40 minutes. Night 31. I woke up, and Jess wasn't in bed. The clock said 2:22, not 2:17, 5 minutes off schedule, and that scared me more than the routine had, because a pattern breaking means something changed. I checked the camera feeds on my phone. She wasn't on the lawn. She wasn't in the living room. She wasn't in the kitchen or the hallway. She was in Caleb's room. On the camera, I could see her kneeling beside his bed, not standing this time, kneeling. Her face close to his, and her lips were moving, the same slow, deliberate movement, the same flat cadence. She was speaking to him while he slept. I got up. I walked to his room. I stood in the doorway. She didn't stop when I appeared. She kept speaking. Low. Not English. Not anything. Those scrambled syllables, the ones that kept the shape of language but emptied out the meaning. Caleb was asleep. His eyes were closed. But his breathing had changed deeper, slower than a 5-year-old should breathe. And his right hand, resting on top of the blanket, was twitching, not randomly, in rhythm with her words, like his fingers were trying to write something his conscious mind wasn't aware of. "Jess," I said, "stop." She stopped. She turned to look at me, and she was crying, tears running down both cheeks. But her expression hadn't changed. It was still flat, still calm. The tears were running down a face that showed no emotion at all, like they belonged to someone else and had just ended up on her. "He's so warm," she whispered. Her voice was hers again, real, present, broken. "He's so warm, and I can't get warm. I've been trying and I can't. Since the water, I can't get warm." I crossed the room. I knelt beside her. I put my arms around her and she was ice. Not cold the way a person gets cold. Cold the way tile is cold. The way water from a deep well is cold. A cold that felt fundamental, like it went deeper than skin and muscle, like it was in her bones, in the architecture of her. She pressed her face into my chest, and I could feel the wet of her tears soaking through my shirt. And the tears were cold, too. Everything about her was cold. And for a moment, just a moment, she felt like Jess, like my wife, scared and hurting and confused, asking me to help her. And I almost believed that's all this was. Almost. Then Caleb spoke. His eyes were still closed. He was still asleep. But his mouth opened, and he said, in a voice that was lower than any 5-year-old's voice should be, "She's almost ready." Jess pulled away from me. The tears stopped. Her face went blank, not calm, not neutral, blank, like a screen that had been turned off. She stood up, walked out of the room, went downstairs. The front door opened and closed. On the camera feed, I watched her walk to her spot on the lawn, and for the first time, she didn't stand facing east. She stood facing Caleb's bedroom window. And somewhere underneath us, in the pipes, in the walls, in the foundation of our boring suburban house, something was humming. One note, low, steady, patient. I couldn't tell if it was coming from the house or from her. I'm writing this from a motel off the highway. Caleb is asleep in the other bed. Jess is at home. I told her I was taking Caleb to visit my brother for a few days. She didn't argue. She didn't ask when we'd be back. She didn't ask which brother or where or why. She stood in the kitchen doorway and watched us pull out of the driveway, and she was holding a glass of water. And she was smiling. It was her smile. I want you to know that. It was Jess's smile. The same one from our wedding photos, the same one she gives Caleb when he does something funny, warm, real, hers. That's the worst part. Because either my wife is experiencing severe PTSD-related parasomnia, and I've abandoned her at home alone because I'm too scared to help her, and I've constructed an entire conspiracy out of grief and sleep deprivation, and I'm a terrible husband who's punishing his wife for nearly dying. Or something came back with her from that water, and it's been wearing her like a coat, and it's been studying me, learning my routines, predicting my questions, and it's been kneeling over my son at night, whispering things into his sleeping brain in a language that doesn't exist. And I left it in my house, in my home, in the body of the woman I love. And I don't know which one is worse, because if it's the first one, I abandoned my wife when she needed me most. And if it's the second one, I left that thing alone in our house, with our photos on the walls, knowing our names, knowing everything Jess knows, because it has her memories. It has 9 years of her memories, and that means it knows where my brother lives. I didn't think about that until just now. Caleb woke up about an hour ago. He asked when we were going home. I told him a few days. He said, "That's okay. Mommy said she'd come find us." When did Mommy say that? Last night, when she was in my room. What else did she say? He yawned, rubbed his eyes. Already half asleep again. She said the water misses us. He was quiet for a while. I thought he was asleep. Then very softly, "Daddy, my hands feel cold." He fell asleep after that, and I've been sitting here since, listening to the pipes in this motel room, and I know that the sound they're making is just old plumbing, pressure in the lines, normal mechanical noise that every building makes. But it sounds like humming, and on the nightstand next to Caleb's bed, on the nightstand that was empty when I checked in, that I'm certain was empty, that I would swear under oath was completely, absolutely empty. There's a glass of water, full to the brim, and his hands resting on top of the blanket, or twitching in his sleep. I told myself, it's just a dream. Kids twitch. It's documented. Normal. I keep telling myself that.